Hello and welcome to a new episode of Her Voice. Over the decades, our ideal body shape and size has changed from the voluptuous screen goddesses such as Jayne Mansfield, Marilyn Monroe, Bridget, Bardot and Ursula Andress to the size zero celebrities of today like Victoria Beckham, Kate Moss, Paris Hilton, Madonna and Cheryl Cole. Young women seeking a sense of self-esteem, self-identity and confident femininity are more vulnerable to society and media's seductive messages, suggesting that in order to be worthy, sexy, successful, powerful and happy, they must pursue the perfect body at all costs. But there is one aspect of media's messages which has largely been ignored because of the continued interest with the thin image. It's the promotion of unhealthy eating attitudes which has contributed to a national epidemic of obesity amongst men and women of all ages. The high prevalence of obesity in our adult population and the likelihood that their conditions will become more critical with the passing of time and the increase of weight provides the rationale for more extreme measures, such as bariatric surgery, gastric bypass, and the top band procedures to control the weight and lower the risks of obesity-related illnesses. In today's show, I will be asking a panel of experts whether they consider Britain the fat man of Europe, and if so, what caused it and what can be done about it. We will be looking at weight loss management, especially gastric bands and bypasses, and the pros and cons of having them. But before I introduce my guests, let's watch this report that highlights this epidemic.
Britain's top doctor, Dame Sally Davies, has warned that obesity is a national risk, particularly among women. Tackling Britain's obesity crisis needs to be made a national priority, England's chief medical officer has warned in her annual report. Official figures show up that half of women of childbearing age in England are overweight or obese, and Professor Dame Sally Davies warns that soaring obesity levels are jeopardising the health of future generations. The UK is the 23rd most obese country in the world according to UN figures published in 2013. It tied with Russia with a 24.9% prevalence of adult obesity. At the top of the list was Mexico at 32.8%, followed by the US at 31.8%. Japan at the lowest rate at 4.5%. The UK has the highest level of obesity in Western Europe according to the same UN report. Ireland comes in second with 24.5% of its population obese, and Spain is ranked third with 24.1%. Soaring obesity rates have been blamed on modern lifestyle with easy access to high-calorie foods and sedentary jobs. Many blame individuals for bad dietary habits. Obesity and diabetes already cost the UK over £5 billion every year, which is likely to rise to £50 billion in the next 36 years. The National Obesity Forum calls on health officials to introduce hard-hitting awareness campaigns, similar to those for smoking, to try to stem the problem. It has urged family doctors to proactively discuss weight management with patients and routinely measure children's height and weight. A panel of MPs recently backed calls for a tax on sugary foods and drinks as part of a bold and urgent reforms to tackle the childhood obesity. They did, however, acknowledge that no single measure is likely to transform eating habits. It is said that introduction of a sugar tax should form part of a package of measures that also includes stringent controls on promotion and clearer labelling. Rising obesity is not the result of a national collapse in willpower. Studies have shown the environment has a major influence on the decision people make about their lifestyle. Known as obesogenic environments, these are places, often urban, that encourage unhealthy eating and inactivity. The car, TV, computers, desk jobs, high-calorie food, and clever food marketing have all contributed to encourage inactivity and overeating. Being overweight or obese increases the risk of many serious illnesses, such as type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, as well as cancer. Obesity has been blamed for about 30,000 deaths a year in the UK, 9,000 of those taking place before retirement age. Alongside disease, obesity can affect people's ability to get and hold down work, their self-esteem and their well-being and mental health.
That was Leah reporting on the rise of obesity in the UK and internationally. Now, I would like to welcome my guests that have kindly joined us in today's show. I have Dr. Khalid Dawas, who's a consultant surgeon and senior lecturer at the University College London, and May Simpkin, a nutritional therapist. Welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us. Now, Dr. Khalid, from a medical perspective, what is obesity and how do people develop this condition?
Well, obesity defines a person who is overweight, who is very overweight. But also, on top of that, there's got to be an abnormally high level of body fat. So one has to be linked to the other, because some people have maybe overweight, but for different reasons, not necessarily because their body fat level is high.
Right.
And it's really the reason why it's changed in terms of prevalence is because of society changes. There are multifactorial reasons for this. There's psychological, there are dietary, there are environmental reasons, which have all come together really to, I think, increase the incidence of obesity at the moment.
Right. Okay. How could you actually assess if someone is actually obese?
So, as you can imagine, a lot of this is that people will tell you, I don't feel very good about myself, I feel overweight.
Yeah.
But if we're to look at it objectively, there are measurements, there are things such as the body mass index,
Right.
which most people would have heard of, and it describes, it's a way of measuring reasonably objectively how someone's weight compares to their height and whether they're the right ratio or not.
Right.
There are certain ranges which are normal, and beyond that range, above the range of 25, it's said somebody is overweight. However, having said that, again, it's got to be taken into the context of being of also having abnormal levels of body fat.
Right.
So
right.
a muscular or a well-toned person who's athletic will have a higher BMI because they've got more muscle on board.
Ah, I see. So it's not necessarily fat, it's more, well, it is the fat actually that you're measuring rather than the muscle.
It's got to be in conjunction. So that you've got to link the body mass index with the body fat composition as well.
Right, okay. Is it possible to inherit this condition, since some people claim that, they say that it runs in my family or it's a genetical thing, for me to be obese. Is that true? I mean, can you inherit obesity?
I wouldn't necessarily say you can inherit obesity. There is probably an element of habits and lifestyle habits as you grow up in a family where, obesity is prevalent. There are genes that make you more susceptible. There are genes that can influence your appetite and your ability to sort of feel full. But in terms of inheriting obesity, I wouldn't say you can inherit it, no.
Right. May, would actually following a certain diet or a change in eating habits help them to lose the weight? Or are there more different weight loss methods that are used for weight loss, basically?
Well, without a doubt, making changes to your diet and lifestyle are going to help with weight loss. So in the first instance, I would always recommend that somebody does address their diet and we look at exactly what you're eating and quantities, how much are you eating, and that's really crucial. Weight loss is really 80% food, 20% exercise. So really, if we can look at what you're eating, look at the quantities, and we'll see if we can achieve the weight loss in this way.
Right, so I think my question wasn't very clear, but what I was trying to say is, other than dieting for the obese, like people that are obese, other than dieting, are there any other sort of methods or diet treatments that they can follow?
Well, none that I would like to recommend.
Right,
I think,
okay.
they're obviously, maybe our medications, supplements, but they're not something that I would like to recommend.
I see.
Yeah.
Right. So they've got to change their eating habits and their lifestyle generally.
I would definitely say that. Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. On the phone, I have with me Dr. Mohammed Al-Kalawi, who's a bariatric surgeon and assistant professor of surgery at the University College Hospital in London. Welcome to the show, Dr. Mohammed.
Thank you very much, Dina.
Could you tell us more about bariatric surgery and how weight loss is achieved, and is it common in young people?
Right. Well, bariatric surgery is a subspecialized division of the gastrointestinal tract surgery, and it's basically to deal with patient who has got high BMIs, or in other words, obese. And this is a surgery that will help them to lose the weight and, more importantly, to maintain the weight loss. And yes, obesity is becoming a very big problem in the UK, and it's not only in the UK, it's in the whole world at the moment. And also, yes, obesity is a big problem in young population.
I see. So, yeah, I mean,
sorry,
is it quite common in young people? Sorry, I interrupted you there.
It is becoming very common in young people, and actually the WHO recent figures are saying that 1 in 4 young people now are either overweight or actually obese.
I see. Right. Okay. Now, once surgery, whether it's a gastric band or bypass, is carried out, how does a patient start to eat, and are there restrictions on their diet?
Do you mean after the surgery?
Yes.
Well, we've got plenty of operations, okay? The public awareness about bariatric surgery is just it's either a gastric band or a gastric bypass, while in fact we've got quite a big spectrum of surgeries. Obviously, the gastric band has been very, very popular during the last few years, and it's basically because it's been done at a very huge numbers starting about 20 years ago. But this is a time when we did not have so many alternatives. Now, currently, we've got much, much better alternatives like the gastric sleeve, the gastric bypass, and even what we call the malabsorptive procedures like the duodenal switch. These are becoming more popular mainly because they will offer a much better weight loss. And again, more importantly, is that the weight loss maintenance 5 or 10 years after the surgery is much better with these new operations.
I see.
Now, talking about how much the patient can eat after the surgery is a very important point, because immediately after the surgery with the new operations, the patients will not have the desire to eat. And if they eat, they will feel full very quickly. So maybe with just 2 or 3 mouthfuls of food, they will feel very satisfied. So the drive, the brain drive for them to eat will be lost. So they don't feel the urge to eat. And after that, because of size limitation of the operation, then their meals are going to be very, very small. So during the first year, the patients will have no problem at all in reducing their intake in terms of calories and in terms of size. But after the first year, when there will be some drive to eat more, and when the capacity of the new stomach or the new setup of the gastrointestinal tract will allow them to eat more, this is when they need to start adopting a better lifestyle to maintain the very long weight loss results.
I see, I see. Now, how effective is weight loss surgery? I mean, what setbacks or risks could a patient encounter after surgery?
Right. Well, weight loss surgery is the most effective way of losing weight in obese and super obese patients, right? If I give an example, if we just take 100 patients, right, probably 99% of them will only lose weight with weight loss surgery, and it's only a minute fraction who will be able to do this with diet and maintain the weight loss. Because the problem with dieting, particularly in obese patients, is that it does not help their brain to be satisfied when they eat. And it's because there is a background hormones which comes from the gastrointestinal tract and go into the circulation to signal to the brain whether someone is hungry or satisfied after eating, right? If a patient, without having surgery, will start going into a diet, then these hormones, particularly the one which signals I'm hungry, will start to increase in their blood with the diet. So the longer they do the diet, this hormone will start to get higher and higher levels. And that's why patients who are on diet are always feeling hungry, even after eating.
I see.
While after bariatric surgery, all these hormones gets back to the normal equilibrium, and the levels becomes more or less normalized, and that's why they will get satisfied easily when eating something very small. Now, talking about the risks, everything in life comes with a risk. But the way we think about bariatric surgery is that if you leave someone who has got a high BMI, in other words, being obese or super obese, then the health hazards of being obese very much outweigh the risks of having the operation. And because these operations now have been done for years and years and years, we've achieved a very good level of safety when we assess patients towards their surgeries. So the risks of surgery definitely are much, much, much less than the risks of staying obese.
I see. Right, okay. Now, what happens is that a recent study of insurance claims of about 2,522 who had undergone bariatric surgery showed 21.9% of complications during the initial hospital stay and a total of 40% risk of complications in the subsequent 6 months. Now, this was more common in those over 40 and led to an increased healthcare expenditure. What setbacks or risks could a patient encounter after surgery, straight after surgery?
Okay, well, first of all, let me tell you one thing, that if you're talking about papers and if you're talking about statistics, okay, statistics can be easily manipulated.
Right.
So unless you're very, very unbiased in looking at figures and data coming from any source, then you can always play a bit with statistics to try to bring the figures you're actually looking for, right? So that's point one. Point two, talking about 29% of complications during the initial hospital stay and then 40% of complications later on, maybe a year after the surgery, that is, again, a very, very vague number. Because if I tell you that, for example, if a patient after bariatric surgery will have a chest infection, which will take probably 2 to 3 days of antibiotics and it's gone, or a port site or a skin infection of one of the stitches, okay, that could be easily sorted at home without even antibiotics, right? It's all about what do you classify as an infection. In the broad term, these are all complications. But on the specific term to bariatric surgery, that can happen with any other surgery.
Right.
So we need to look into this figure into much more depth to try to identify what do you classify as a bariatric surgery complication.
Yeah.
Of course, there are risks and there are complications of bariatric surgery, but if we're going to talk about them, then we need to talk about leaks, which can happen after any type of anastomosis or stippling, and this is the biggest worry in bariatric surgery. We can talk about bleeding, we can talk about things called like hernias, we can talk about malnutrition, which can happen later on after bariatric surgery. But then, none of these will even reach 5%.
I see.
So if you take the bigger picture of complications, 50%. Yeah, but what's 50%? It could be a stitch infection. Okay, you've got Mr. Dowles next to you, and then he probably will agree with me that this is something that we see in any other surgery. It's not only even gastrointestinal, in any other surgical procedures.
Right.
But we need to be specific about what are the complications of bariatric surgery.
Well, just wanted to ask you, how common is weight loss surgery in the Middle East, and would you recommend it for anyone?
All right. The Middle East is probably the third largest population are affected by obesity worldwide. And I'm talking about BMIs above 35 up to 60, 70. I go and visit often the Gulf and Egypt, where I usually come from, and the problem is probably exactly the same like here in the UK. Now, recommending bariatric surgery for Middle Eastern population, yes, definitely, I do recommend it. It's not only because they are obese or they are super obese where the operation is definitely eligible, but it's only because of the background and the genetic backgrounds which make these special populations are a much more higher risks for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and sleep apnea.
Right.
So I definitely recommend the surgery, but it has got to be done within the guidelines. So it's not someone who has got an extra few kilograms should go and have bariatric surgery. And I've seen cases like this being done in the Middle East. No, it has got to be done within the guidelines, which means the patient has got to be a BMI of 30 with diabetes, as the guidelines here in the UK, or someone's got to be a BMI of 40 or 35, maybe. Yeah, you can go for that.
Well, just one more question, Dr. Mohammed, before we let you go. Has it become more possible for patients to have this surgery under the NHS? And if so, do you recommend them to have it done privately or through the NHS?
The standards within the NHS are extremely good. And to be honest, here in the UK, I can't see a difference in either the performance level or the level of care that the patients would get in either of them. It would be exactly the same. The NHS offers us an excellent service here in the UK, and I'm part of it.
Dr. Mohammed Al-Kalawi, bariatric surgeon and assistant professor of surgery at University College Hospital in London, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Dr. Khalid, now one of the major gastric or complications that follow gastric banding or bypass is esophageal reflux. How common for this to happen, and what symptoms do patients present?
It's usually, as we find, it's the other way around. So patients present with reflux as part of their symptoms, and I think if there's reflux, increasing reflux after the surgery, one has to wonder about what's going on, and are there some issues perhaps that have happened which are either unlinked to the surgery or perhaps as side effects of the surgery. But usually the classic scenario is presenting with reflux as part of the overall obesity issue. And the obesity, as we all know, is linked, it is a matter of diet primarily, and eating in a bad way, bad habits, they encourage reflux. And that's usually how we see it.
I see. So how is the reflux in gastric banding patients different from a normal person that suffers from gastroesophageal reflux disease? I'm trying to be really professional here with the wording.
Well, gastroesophageal reflux, if we abbreviate it to GORD,
right,
GORD,
yes, that's right.
Which will make it easier for us to pronounce it in the future. Is the reflux is acid reflux primarily is a symptom of, again, many other lifestyle issues primarily. There are causes such as hiatus hernias, which are, let's say, we keep them aside for now. But the most common cause is down to poor diet or poor way of eating and lifestyle issues, stress. The typical person with gastroesophageal reflux is a city-dwelling person who has a fast pace of life, eats very quickly, drinks lots of coffee. That's a classical picture.
Right. Okay.
And therefore, if you add on top of that, and as a result perhaps of those bad lifestyle choices issues, obesity, that's how they become linked. So they are connected certainly, and you find both in the similar profile of patient.
I see. Do patients suffer of any nutritional derangements due to deficiencies of the micronutrients after bariatric procedures?
Well, the end result of a bariatric procedure is a smaller stomach. So the actual space you have for the food to come in is much, much smaller. So you actually cannot eat the same quantities as you would have before. So already in itself, you are not going to be able to take in as many nutrients as you could before. So it is very important that everything you eat counts and that everything is very nutrient dense so that you can make sure that you get the nutrients. But yes, unless you are really planning your meals very carefully, there is a chance that you could be nutrient deficient after bariatric surgery.
I see. And what diet plan would you actually recommend for a patient that suffers continuously from esophageal reflux, like what Dr. Khalid said? I mean, what diet plan would you actually recommend?
Okay. Well, one of the first things is you need to actually chew the food very, very carefully. So you need to take a little bit more time, just sit back, relax a little bit and actually chew the food. That's very important because that food will then be able to be processed and you can absorb the nutrients much more easily. And also to eat more slowly so that, you don't overfill the stomach very, very quickly. If you overfill very quickly, the reflux will come up and then you will get the symptoms.
I see.
But then again, making sure that everything has as many nutrients as possible.
I see.
So some, very good soups that have a lot of good nutrients in, and maybe even adding in some supplements to make sure that you are getting all the nutrients.
I see. Now, research, Dr. Khalid, suggests that obesity is linked to several cancers, including the esophageal or the gullet and the womb, the bowel tumours. Which one is more common and which one is associated with weight loss surgery?
Well, the commonest cancers, GI cancers, the gastrointestinal cancers that we have, are the colonic cancers, and those by far out of the list that you mentioned are the commonest ones, certainly in the West.
Right.
But interestingly, there's an increasing incidence of esophageal or gullet cancers, as they're known kind of in slang terms, over the last few years, particularly in the UK. Now, there's a drive in the UK to try and diagnose them early and really focus on why this is happening.
How come in the
Well,
UK?
we think, again, this is linked, as we've mentioned, to obesity. It's linked to the reflux problems, and those epidemics, let's say call them, are happening all at the same time, simultaneously, and therefore the increase in the incidence of esophageal cancers. But interestingly, on the shop floor, what we see in hospitals, patients come to us, obesity is very common, and we are noticing this quite, on a day-to-day basis. Patients who come to surgery because of their cancers are, on the whole, overweight.
I see, right, okay. I do have with me at the moment Miss Tony Jenkins, yes?
Hello.
I would like to welcome to the show Tony Jenkins.
Hello.
Hello there. Tony is a clinical nurse specialist in bariatric surgery since 2001 and who also had a gastric band in 2000 and a bypass in 2004. So welcome to the show, Tony, and thank you for joining us.
No problem.
Tony, tell us, why did you choose to have a gastric band in 2000 and then a bypass in 2004?
When I decided to have weight loss surgery back in 2000, to be honest, there wasn't really very much available. There'd been quite an old-fashioned operation called stomach stapling, and I knew I didn't want that one because it was quite extreme. And then I heard about the gastric band, and it was particularly attractive at the time because it was done with keyhole surgery. So I went and had that done. I actually went abroad for my operation. It's not something I particularly recommend, but there were very few people doing it in the UK at the time.
Right.
So I went to France and found an expert to do it for me and lost something in the region of 9 stone with a band. I was very happy with my band.
Wow, brilliant.
However, 4 years down the line, I ended up with a complication called an erosion where the band had started to cut into my stomach, so it needed to be removed.
Right.
I discussed it with my surgeon, and it was very obvious to me that if I just had the band removed on its own and had nothing else replacing it, that I'd probably regain all the weight again. So it was have another operation.
Right.
And so I was offered 2 or 3 other operations, and I picked the bypass because it seemed probably the most longer lasting for me.
Right, right. What about your general lifestyle? How did it change following surgery?
Following surgery, it was probably much more noticeable initially after the gastric band because I really was eating much smaller volumes. And also, I was working as a nurse at the time and tend to sort of snatch lunch breaks where you kind of wash your food down really quickly without really thinking about it. And that's something you definitely can't do after weight loss surgery. You have to really consciously and mindfully eat. Slow down when you're eating, not eat and drink at the same time, and just take your time and get more benefit from what you're eating. And because you've only got so much room in there, you have to make sure that you're actually getting your money's worth out of your food. So you need to eat almost the good food first, a bit like when you're a child and you leave your favourite roast potatoes to last. To an extent, I still eat like that. I eat the good stuff first.
Okay.
And then if there's room left over at the end, I eat the not such good stuff.
Oh, okay. Right, that's interesting. Now, being a nurse in this field, how often do you see bariatric surgery being carried out on youngsters?
They're certainly getting younger. I mean, I don't work in a field where we actually do paediatric weight loss surgery because that really is very specialised. But I've been quite shocked at how many people I've seen morbidly obese under about the age of 25, and particularly in their teens, because you've got to do a lot of eating very early on to get morbidly obese so young, and that does disturb me. Particularly when I see a 20-year-old that's got a body mass index of above 40. That really does worry me.
I see. Now, a new study suggests that by adding a sugar tax on sweetened drinks, it would save 3.7 million people from becoming obese over the next 10 years, reducing the chances of illness and saving the NHS millions of pounds. What's your opinion about this study?
In theory, I think it's a great idea. In practice, I don't think it's going to make a difference because we know that actually putting a massive amount of tax on alcohol and cigarettes doesn't really stop people buying them.
That's
so
true.
I think that people will still buy them, and then what they'll do is they'll go in the same way that they do now. They'll go on the train to France for the day, or the boat to France for the day, and stock up in the local supermarket. People will, if they want it, they're going to have it. And sugar is super, super addictive. I don't think putting tax on it is going to stop people buying it.
That's true. That's true. What support and care do you offer to bariatric patients, Tony?
Me personally, or the service?
Well, you yourself.
You myself. I mean, I see people prior to their operation when they're just, even in the early stage, where they're just contemplating surgery. In fact, that's just what I've been doing now, explaining to a group of potential patients the different types of operations, the pros and cons of all of them, how it would affect their lifestyle, the consequences of which operation they choose. And so at some point, it's just helping people to decide whether or not they even think surgery is an option for them. And not having surgery is also an option. We have to stress that one. Finding out what level of support they've got around them, or whether it's even really for them. And then we prepare people physically in the build-up towards the surgery to make sure they're as fit as possible. We don't like nasty surprises on the day, so we like to do lots of investigations beforehand so that we are prepared for any eventualities.
Yes.
We see them after the operation to support them in the type of foods they should be eating and how to cope. We run a patient support group that's very popular, which is very patient-led, and that a lot of patients really love that, probably more than anything else we can offer, because they can talk to real people that can be true role models for them because they've walked that same path, and they get tremendous advice from people that have been there before them, and it's incredibly reassuring for them.
That's brilliant. Well, Tanya Jenkins, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show. So thank you.
Thank you. My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Take care. Now, many celebrities wanted the easy and quick way of losing weight and decided to have bariatric surgery. Let's find out who they are.
Being a celebrity but suffering from obesity could mean the end of an era in the world of riches and fame. But with the popularity and increase in bariatric surgery, more and more celebrities are choosing this fast method of weight loss to remain in the business of showbiz. Let's see who's undergone weight loss surgery to help their weight loss journey. Randy Jackson. Best known for his role as a judge for American Idol, Randy Jackson had weight loss surgery after being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. After his 2003 procedure, he went on to lose 114 pounds. Sharon Osbourne. In 1999, Sharon Osbourne, best known for being a judge for many different shows, and also married to famous musician Ozzy Osbourne, had lap band surgery. Through her surgery and diet and exercise, Sharon managed to lose 125 pounds. Al Roker. The famous weatherman had weight loss surgery in 2002 to help manage his weight. He went on to go to destroy the stigma of obesity in America. He states that weight management is just as difficult a challenge as overcoming a drug addiction. Roseanne Barr had her gastric bypass surgery when she had reached over 350 pounds. She had stated, "I had my entire digestive system removed, so I should look thinner." Lisa Lampanelli. The comedian and actress had a lap band in 2012 and lost over 100 pounds as a result. Star Jones had gastric bypass surgery in 2003 and she went from a size 26 to a size 6. Carney Wilson. The Wilson Phillips Group member lost 150 pounds following gastric bypass surgery in 1999. The procedure, which was broadcast live on the internet, took her from a size 28 to a size 6. Nigella Lawson, who lost more than 3 stone following her gastric bypass. Anne Diamond, the journalist, underwent a lap band procedure in 2005, however she had several surgeries before she actually started to see the weight loss. And finally Fern Britton, the TV host who underwent lap band surgery in 2006.
May, if a patient with a high BMI and suffers from obesity approaches you for advice about dieting, would you recommend bariatric surgery for them?
They're unlikely to be coming to see me if they were interested in bariatric surgery.
Yeah.
I would always go back to the diet. We need to
Right.
go back to basics, look at what you're eating, look at how much you're eating, and also consider your lifestyle as well. There are reasons why your BMI has increased,
Right.
and that's something that I would be very interested to look into much further.
So how would you actually look into it so much further? How would you
I would look
investigate?
at,
Where would you start?
Okay, they would come to me with a food diary,
Yeah.
so we get an idea of exactly what they're eating, when they're eating, what types of food they're eating, and also what their lifestyle is. So do they like to cook? Do they like to, do they have a big social life? Are they eating as a family? Are they grabbing things on the run? Are they snacking? What's their job? All those things really have a big influence in your weight gain and, of course, your weight loss as well. Activity levels are crucial as well. We lead much more sedentary lives now, so we need to try and introduce a little bit more activity. But really, we need to go back to the diet and really look at what you're eating and how much you're eating, specifically when we're looking at weight loss as a goal.
Right. Dr. Khalid, are patients told about the potential risk of developing esophageal cancer before going ahead with gastric bands and gastric bypass or any other method of weight loss surgery?
I think I'd be very surprised if that was part of anybody's consenting process or explanation for having a bypass, because there isn't a direct link that we know of. The link is more about, in fact, trying to reduce your risks of cancer effectively by reducing your weight and therefore reducing not just the risk of cancer primarily, but in fact primarily looking at other risk factors like diabetes, hypercholesterolemia, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. Those are the things that you can influence certainly more quickly with surgery or with any other weight loss strategy. So conversely, you're trying to reduce the risk.
I see. Right. Okay. Because I've read the other day about the fact that how this patient actually, following her gastric band, had actually suffered from cancer, esophageal cancer, which is something that she was quite surprised about. So that's why I was just thinking maybe there is a link between the two, because this is not only one patient I've actually read about, but we're talking about several that when I was sort of looking online. So I don't know whether there is a link or whether it was something that she had prior to the band, and then she suddenly developed it. So
I think the latter point is very valid, because like we said earlier, the risks for both are similar. Right. So obesity gives you more reflux. Obesity presents you with a higher risk of cancer. We're talking about a small risk here, but nevertheless, there is a risk.
There is a risk, yeah.
And one of the issues that one has to tackle when seeing patients before they have the surgery is a thorough investigation to make sure that you're not missing any symptoms which might give you alarm, which might suggest there's cancer beneath all this. So they do need investigation, they need a very careful history to make sure you're going down the right route.
I see.
So I suspect in some of these cases this is something that's going on anyway, or perhaps at a very early stage and therefore not presenting with symptoms, much more difficult to pick up. Or there was a disease in the first place and it just was missed, unfortunately.
Right, because there are articles. I mean, I'm just going to read this because I've seen this, like I said, online. There are articles that suggest that they have now associated the band with precancerous cellular changes in the esophagus due to the band squeezing the stomach and causing acid to sit there, and in some people seep up into the lower esophageal. So. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the acid and its effect on the lining of the esophagus is we know that there's an effect. We know it starts off with inflammation, what's called esophagitis, inflammation in the esophagus as a result of increased acid exposure.
Yeah.
That can develop, it becomes a change in the cell lining and eventually can develop into cancer.
Yeah.
But just linked into what you're saying, we don't know whether reducing, once this happened, once you do have damage in the cells, which is probably at a stage where we're not going to be able to, it's going to be quite a long way down the development process from being normal to being cancer, whether stopping that acid exposure then reverses those changes. That I don't think anybody really knows. There are lots of speculation and it makes sense, but if we're to be absolutely scientific about it, we don't really know whether that happens or not.
I see. Right. Okay. Our final guest in today's show is Mr. Robin Joyce. I don't know if we have Robin.
Yes, I'm here.
With us. Hello, Mr. Robin.
Hello, Dina.
Hello. We've got Robin Joyce, who's a member of the BOSPA committee, and BOSPA stands for British Obesity Surgery Patients Association. Robin, what's the purpose of your charity, and who is it for, and why?
Well, we are all, the whole charity is run by patients for patients. We're here to help people who are having surgery or have had surgery in the past. It's just a support. And we find people who attend the meetings and join tend to do better than people who don't, if you understand what I mean. Anybody who says bariatric surgery is an easy journey or cheating doesn't know what they're talking about.
I see. Now, one of your organization's aim is to empower your members with education about how to achieve their desired result from surgery. How do you educate your patients?
It's by talking to people who've been there, done it, and worn the T-shirt. If you understand what I mean. Nobody's a professional bariatric surgeon. Well, we do have bariatric surgeons who talk to us, but. We are patients, so we know some people are successful, some people aren't. It depends on the support they get.
Now your association is for patients and it's run by patients. Therefore, does that make you a patient of bariatric surgery?
I'm an ex-patient. Well, I am a patient. I had my surgery nearly 5 years ago.
Five years ago?
And I'm actually one of the most successful. I would say. I mean, there are more people who have lost weight than I have, but I am comfortable in my own body now.
Right. Okay. And how successful was it?
As I went for my surgery, I was 23 stone. Now, 5 years on the time, I've lost 11 stone. I'm just over 12 stone.
And how old are you, if you don't mind me asking, Robin?
Sorry?
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 71.
Wow. You look brilliant for 71.
Yeah. I mean, I've got another patient with me, Mandy, who is actually one of the other trustees of BOSPA, standing beside me. She's not as far into the journey as I am, but she is a band patient, and of course the difference between the two is quite marked.
I see.
I was listening to your previous speaker and you were talking about cancer and the reflux. The reflux happens when people aren't eating properly, by the way.
I see. Did you suffer from reflux yourself?
I have had reflux when I've not followed the rules.
Uh-huh. Right.
I mean, as I said, it's not an easy journey. Anybody who's contemplating has got to have their mind in the right place. Anybody who thinks it's a quick fix is living in cloud cuckoo land.
Right. Right. Okay. So it's not a quick fix, but it does take time, obviously. And by the sound of it, you've lost a lot of weight.
10% of the success of bariatric surgery is surgery. 90% is down to the patient themselves. They have to discipline themselves.
I see.
You have a short window of time, particularly with the bypass, of about 18 months before the gut hormones change, to get your eating habits correct before you start getting hunger pangs again.
I see. Okay. Well, finally, Robin, are we a society of high obesity? And what do you think is the solution to this epidemic?
Right. There are several reasons. Several things that should be done. One is restaurants stop doing these ginormous meals. People are greedy. Doesn't matter. I mean, one thing I'd say to our members and people we talk to, we will never lose our fat heads. Now, Britain is becoming a people of fat heads. They will fill the plates up and they will eat it to stuffing point. They don't need it. That's one of them. One reason is people, it goes back to school. When I was at school, you had cookery lessons. They don't do that anymore. People don't know how to cook.
That's true. We all eat out, don't we? It's all takeaway.
Sorry?
It's all takeaway and junk food.
It's all takeaway and junk food. I mean, people need to know the value of food.
Right. So we do need to change our lifestyle, don't we?
We do. I mean, you know, we need to start at an early age. We need to start at school. Jamie Oliver had a good idea. I'm sorry, he's good. He was good. I don't agree with some of his ways that he does things, but I think his mindset was in the right place. Hopefully,
yes.
Yeah.
Well, Robin Joyce, thank you so much once again for joining us on the show today.
Sorry, I haven't spoken to Mandy. She's standing here beside me.
Oh, okay. Say hi to her. It's just that we are running out of time. But thank you so much for her for being with me as well. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. And send my regards to your wife.
I mean, if anybody's looking for a BOSPA, then we do have a group in the London area. If they look it up.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
May, is there such a thing as an emotional eater, and how or why?
Yes, I think there is. And, you know, obesity and depression and mental health issues like that are linked. So if you're not feeling great and you're not feeling yourself, food can be a comfort. And if that's long term and that's a regular occurrence, that will lead to obesity. So, so yes, I think there is such a thing.
And Dr. Khaled, what other complications that could occur with bariatric surgery and could be carcinogenic, do you think?
Well, the complications of bariatric surgery can either be, you can classify them into the immediate complications at the time of surgery. So this is in hospital, we're talking about, and a patient would be expected to know about this because it would be part of the explanation about risks of bleeding, risks of developing infections, chest infections, wound infections after surgery, the risks of thrombosis, clots in the veins, which is a real risk, particularly when patients are overweight and perhaps not so mobile. So all these factors really influence the way that these patients are managed in hospital. You know, they're encouraged to get out of bed very quickly. They're encouraged to go back to normal activities as quickly as possible. All these reduce their risks. In the long term, I think as May mentioned earlier, there the issue about how you manage the change in the diet, whether they need supplementation or not. So you've got to think about electrolyte imbalances, vitamin imbalances, and these have to be factored in terms of the follow-up.
How do you treat bariatric-related cancer, and what's the likelihood of developing cancer in the bowels?
Well, I mean, this is where the high prevalence of cancers is at the moment. I mean, the patients are treated in the same way as anybody who has cancer. So they go through the same process of diagnosis, they go through the same process of treatment. I think one thing that we do stress to these patients, particularly, I'm an esophageal surgeon, so I see patients who perhaps might be overweight and maybe malnourished, which is an odd thing to think about, because they're malnourished because they're eating the wrong kind of food. They've got the wrong type of nutrients on board. And it's really not about keeping, we talk to patients about potential for loss of weight during the treatment, but it's more about staying fit. The important is really being fit and healthy rather than being the right weight. And that's what we focus on. So the treatment is the same. They have a higher complication rate by definition, because patients who are overweight, as we mentioned, have these other complications, and the risks of thrombosis infections is higher in patients who are overweight. There's no doubt about it. So it does put a lot of stress on those caring for such patients, because the worry is higher. And also the society has to accept those extra risks. So when they go back home, they need extra support.
Right. Okay. And with somebody that is diagnosed with bowel cancer, what's the treatment like? And well, symptoms and the treatment. What symptoms do they present, and what are the treatments that are available?
So bowel cancer, if we say bowel cancer is cancer of the colon, because that's really the common bit, and let's say leave the upper end of the bowel, which is the esophagus and the stomach, aside for a moment. The colonic cancers tend to present with change in the bowel habit. So somebody who's used to a particular habit in terms of how often they go to the toilet or what the consistency is, that changes. It can present with altered color of stool, so it's either very dark, black typically if it's something that's bleeding from a top end of the colon, or a fresher perhaps blood from the bottom end. Other things come later on, so weight loss and pain and so on, those come much later on.
Right.
So they can be subtle symptoms. Typically we look at change in bowel habit, we look at possibility of bleeding as early signs of bowel cancer. And those patients get, certainly in the UK, get screened at the moment. And you can test for blood in the stool, and then the next investigation will be a camera test, what's called a colonoscopy.
Right.
And then treatment really depends on the stage, depends on what this cancer is, where it is, and what stage it's at. And the treatment comprises a combination of radiotherapy, possibly chemotherapy and surgery, as long as surgery obviously for the operable tumours that haven't spread.
And how common is this in the Middle East?
I haven't worked in the Middle East, and I don't know the incidence figures over there, but I think worldwide colon cancer is a common problem.
Right,
now the Middle East will always, I think,
because remember the diet and the lifestyle that they have there is completely different from over here. So
you're absolutely right, but it's changing. I mean, I think most of the world is changing to a Western type diet, and as countries go through the development phase, they become more westernized in their diet, and we're seeing the same disease processes. So I don't think it's very, very different. I think we will probably see that the incidence rates are not too dissimilar to what we find here in the UK. And colon cancer is not uncommon in the Middle East by any means.
What about you, May? What do you think about the actual sort of lifestyle that they lead in the Middle East? I mean, how common for them to actually sort of develop any type of bowel cancer because of the lifestyle? Obviously you are aware of the diet over there. So what?
I mean, one of the key things with bowel cancer is fibre. And, as Dr. Khalid suggests, that as people start veering towards a more westernised diet, that can be more junk food, it can be more takeouts, which is typically not so high in fibre. So if the diet is much less in fibre, we will have a risk of being more susceptible to bowel cancer. So really, as always, a typical healthy diet with plenty of vegetables, plenty of fibre is going to be the best way to safeguard against bowel cancer.
Well, that's probably the best way to end it. Okay, well, sadly, we have come to the end of the show. I would like to thank Dr. Khalid Dawas and May Simpkin for joining me in the studio, and for Dr. Mohammed Al-Qalawi, Tony Jenkins, Robin Joyce for joining me on the phone. It's been a real pleasure having you all on the show, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There is no doubt that bariatric surgery, when carried out with the right medical and psychological pre- and post-operative care, can be hugely beneficial. It prevents premature death, vastly improves quality of life, and is very cost-effective for the NHS. Nevertheless, bariatric surgery should be treated with extreme caution, as should any operation that entails removing or drastically curtailing a vital organ of the body. And while surgery opens some doors, it also sometimes seems to close others. There just never seems to be a proper solution to weight loss without the element of suffering, because as they say, no gain without pain. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.